Finance Committee, Monday, December 13th, 2021, 6 p.m. The Finance Committee will hold a public hearing on Monday, December 13, 2021 at 6 p.m. via video conference. Meeting can be viewed at https://bit.ly/31 capital GMIY lowercase k, or by phone at 312-626-6799 or 301-715-8592. Meeting webinar ID 938-3401-3928. Phone passcode 428-54271. Item number 1, LM 2021-0524. Ordinance amendment to appropriating ordinance number 1, authorizing budget transfer number 133-22-1, transferring funds from the expenditure reserve account to the Office of Corporation Counsel Legal Services account in the amount of $200,000.00 to amend the current legal service agreements with the law firms of Bircham and Moses and Howard and Ludorf. Number 2, LM 2021-0304. Order of the Board of Alders of the City of New Haven approving a fee schedule and accounting for the Canaldoc Boathouse. Item number 3, LM 2021-0464. Order to read and file the updated budgetary and financial reports for the month of September 2021 in compliance with Article 8, Section 5 of the Charter. Number 4, LM 2021-0521. Order to read and file the updated budgetary and financial reports for the month of October 2021 in compliance with Article 8, Section 5 of the Charter. These items are filed with the City Clerk and may be inspected at room 202, 200 Orange Street, New Haven. Per order, the Honorable Yvette Hamilton, Chair, attest Michael Smart, City Clerk. If you need a disability-related accommodation, please call 3 business days in advance, 946-7651 voice or 946-8582 TTY. The public may join the meeting and may send public comment to publictestimony@newhavenct.gov. Meeting can be viewed at https://bit.ly/31 capital GMIY lowercase k, or by phone at 312-626-6799 or 301-715-8592. Meeting webinar ID 938-3401-3928. Phone passcode 428-54271. Note, since the meeting is remote, participation by a quorum of members is expressly prohibited at the physical location and will not be present. However, any member of the public may request in writing a physical location and any electronic equipment necessary to attend the meeting in real time, no later than 24 hours prior to the meeting. Said individual shall have the same opportunities to provide comment or otherwise participate in the meeting as would be afforded if the meeting was held in person, with the following exception. Under law, if such person loses the ability to participate because of an interruption, failure, or degradation of such person's connection to the meeting by electronic equipment, the committee is not required to adjourn or postpone the meeting. Next, we will have introductions of alders. I will call the roll. As I mentioned before, Alder Hamilton, the chair of the committee, will not be able to join us. I am at Alder Adam Marchand. Alder Santiago. Alder DeCola.
Sal DeCola, Ward 18.
Alder Jeanette Morrison.
Alder Jeanette Morrison, Ward 22.
Alder Walker Myers.
Alders Haisha Walker Myers, Ward 23.
Alder Festa.
Anna Festa, Ward 10.
Alder Furlow.
Good evening, Richard Furlow, Ward 27.
Alder Evelyn Rodriguez. Alder Ron Hurt.
Alder Ron Hurt, Ward 3.
And Alder Charles Decker. Thank you thank you to all my colleagues who are members of the committee who are here this evening. We do have a quorum. I would like to recognize our colleague Alder Frank Douglas from Ward 2, who is present. We appreciate your being here. Earlier, I saw Alder Carmen Rodriguez briefly in the room, so I want to recognize her. And of course, we'll recognize other alders should they join the meeting at some point during our proceedings. All right, we have 4 items on the agenda, but it's really 3. The first is a transfer to put more money into the Corporation Council budget so they can increase the maximum allowable charges for 2 of the law firms that the city contracts with. The second is about the Canaldoc Boathouse fee schedule and accounting practice. And the last 2 items are the monthlies of September and October. So that's really 3 items. And we'll proceed in the order of the agenda, and we'll proceed as we have during this entire pandemic. We will invite the proponent or maker of an item to give a presentation. Then we'll allow members of the committee to ask questions. I'll read through the roster as it is listed on our city website. I would ask colleagues please to keep their questions to 4, although we, depending on time, might have a second go around if folks have follow-up questions. Then we'll proceed to the public comment on each item. I anticipate giving 3 opportunities for the public to comment after item 1, after item 2, and after items 3 and 4. And it's my intention and goal to vote these items out of committee one way or the other this evening. So, having said all that, I'm doing one final scan to see if any other colleagues need to be recognized, and seeing none. Mr. Lucas, if you would please allow the Corporation Counsel and her team to join the panel. And we'll begin with item 1. While the city staff are joining the panel, I just want to thank alders for adhering to the protocol. Members of the committee are asked please to be on camera as much as you are able. I know sometimes we need to step aside to take care of some business, but we would ask members of the committee to stay on camera as much as possible. And other alders who are not part of the committee, we'd ask them to stay off camera. That helps members of the public and everybody involved in this proceeding to know who's on the committee and who's not. I see our acting controller, Michael Gormany, has joined us, and as well as representatives from the Corporation Council. I think, Mr. Gormany, I'll hand it off to you to introduce your team, and please have each member introduce themselves with names and addresses, please.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Marchand. Michael Gormany, City Acting Controller, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut. And on the call, I'll start with, I believe we have Corporation Counsel Pat King.
Yes, Patricia King, Corporation Counsel, 32 Vista Terrace in New Haven.
And we have Deputy Corporation Counsel Michelle Dupree.
Good evening, Michelle Dupre, 175 South End Road, East Haven.
And we have Deputy Corporation Counsel Rod Williams.
Good evening, Rod Williams, 20 Lancelot Drive from North Haven.
All right, and I believe that is all that is attending from Corporation Counsel. So I will just begin the presentation. We are here before the Finance Committee to enter into a transfer for fiscal year, the current fiscal year 2021-22, transferring $200,000 from the expenditure reserve account into the Corporation Counsel legal service account. As Pat King and her team will go into, this is additional funding needed for fiscal year 22 for 2 law firms, Bertram Moses and Howden Ludorf, for various cases that the Corporation Counsel's office has for this fiscal year. So with that being said, I will turn it over to Pat King to talk about the transfer, and then I will close it out for Pat King and her team. So Pat?
Okay, thank you very much and good evening, Honorable Alders. Thank you very much for hearing our request tonight. As Mr. Gormany indicated, we are looking for transfer for additional funds for 2 law firms, Bircham and Moses and Howden Ludorf. There are really 2 primary drivers of these requests, and each is different for each law firm. So as to Howden Ludorf first, Howden Ludorf, as you may be aware, has been handling a number of our police misconduct cases in state and federal court. These cases are often big ticket items. They also handle some of our serious regular civil litigation. As you also know, Attorney Mike Wallach retired in February of 2021. And Mike had been with the city for, I think, over 20 years, at least 20 years, and had developed an expertise in federal court and handled many of our police misconduct cases in federal court on an in-house basis. When Mike retired, we did not have the expertise among the remainder of our staff in-house to cover these cases, nor did we have the capacity to take them on in-house with more than one attorney working on them. So we assigned a number of these cases over to Howden Ludorf for them to handle due to their expertise in these matters. They do a very good job for us. Their rates are extremely reasonable, given the skill that they have and the nature of the work and the city's exposure on these cases. We did advertise and hire a new litigation attorney, but we were not able to find an attorney with the level of expertise in federal court that Mike Wallach had. We have hired a new litigator who will be handling cases in state court, and we have recently worked out a plan where one of our in-house counsel will start taking on these federal cases and expand his expertise in the similar way that Mike Wallach had expanded his. Mike Wallach started as a staff attorney, took on more and more of these cases and developed the expertise over the years. So one of our in-house attorneys is now online to take care of that for us. And our newest hire is getting acclimated and is working actually on his first jury trial as we speak. The first day of evidence was today. So with that, we do expect to transfer possibly some of the cases, some of the, shall we say, less serious cases back to our attorney in-house now, and continue to assign some of the less serious federal cases to our attorney in-house so that, hopefully in as time goes on, we'll have an attorney who can develop that same level of expertise that we were so fortunate to have with Mike Wallach. In addition, Howden Ludorf has been working on a number of complicated cases that were assigned to it initially. I don't really want to go into the specifics of the individual cases, but some of them have been very active, as overall the courts are now making up for lost time due to COVID. I would note that last year we didn't use all our outside counsel funds, I think largely because of the closure due to COVID. So things are picking up again and cases are being called in. We have at least one of these major cases that Howden Ludorf is handling that is currently in mediation. If it settles, we will save some of the cost of trial, but at this point we can't depend on that. So we may see some savings of some of these resolved, but at this point, to make sure that we have funds to cover their current needs, we are requesting funding from them, And the second request is to Bircham and Moses. Bircham and Moses, as you also are aware, has been handling a number of our labor relations cases. The Office of Labor Relations is extremely short-staffed. We have one staff attorney with a director and 1 executive assistant. The staff attorney is relatively new and has been able to handle some of the day-to-day matters that come up, but the more serious matters have been assigned to Burcham and Moses. And by serious matters, I mean serious employee misconduct where there is either serious discipline that is recommended or imposed or terminations. And these serious cases, although they're administrative cases, are the equivalent to preparing for trials. Floyd Dugas at Burcham has a great deal of expertise in these areas. He has gotten great results for us. So in order to make sure that these cases are covered and that the city is appropriately represented, we have need to use his services for these cases. In addition to the regular flow of business in labor relations, which is significant, there are currently 7 contracts that are open and that will be negotiated. So our labor relations director has her hands full just trying to deal with that. And labor relations has also worked on other projects such as working out the labor issues related to the vaccine mandate, return to work policies, and other projects that have been time consuming, even though they're not individual cases. So given the caseload that Attorney Dugas has been asked to take on, we are not going to be able to cover the cost of that representation with the current allocation of funds. We do have funds. I think our total needs are $325,000, but we do have $200,000 we would need, and we do have the remainder in available or unencumbered funds currently in the office, currently allocated to us, I should say. It may be that as the fiscal year goes on, some other encumbered funds may not be fully used, but we can never predict how litigation is going to go. We never can predict who's going to sue us and when. So we have, so at this point, we are still leaving those funds in reserve. So if you have any questions, I hope that was informative for you, but I'll be happy to entertain any questions if you have them. And Rod Williams, our litigation deputy, is here, and as is Michelle Dupree, our labor and employment deputy. So to the extent that they can also be helpful in answering your questions, we're happy to address them.
Thank you, Attorney King. Mr. Gormany, you had some final things to say before we transition to questions?
I think Attorney King covered what I was going to say towards the end, which is, we're seeing due to COVID, as I've mentioned at various meetings, we're seeing an uptick right now in cases. So again, that's part of the reason that this $200,000 is needed. Just catching up with folks who are filing in the courts. And as Attorney King mentioned, one of the questions that often come up during this type of transfer for legal services is it enough? Is a transfer enough? And I think as Attorney King mentioned, we cannot predict who's going to sue us or what's going to happen during the fiscal year. So obviously, if we need additional funding during the fiscal year, we will come back to this board. Again, the funding that we're requesting to transfer from is expenditure reserve, which was budgeted for this fiscal year at $2.3 million, which was budgeted for any unanticipated expenses that would come up during this fiscal year, whether it be overtime, a transfer like this, COVID related, so on and so forth. So that is all I have, Vice Chair Marchand, if you want to open it up to questions for us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gormany. Thank you, Attorney King. We will go to questions from the committee. I will call through the roll, starting with Alder Santiago, who is not here. Alder DeCola.
I have no question at this time, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Alder Morrison.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Walker Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Attorney King answered my questions in her explanation.
Thank you, Alder Walker Myers. Before I continue through the roll, let me just recognize our colleague Alder Charles Decker from Ward 9, who has joined us. Thank you for being here, sir. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand. I do have a couple of questions regarding some of the caseload. Are these cases, I mean, we were in a pandemic, the courts were obviously closed or not hearing all cases. How do we compare pre-pandemic with the number of cases we had then versus now?
Thank you, Alder Festa. I would refer that question to our deputy because I think I was in this office for 2 months before the pandemic hit and the courts closed down. So I don't have, unfortunately, a lot of experience with that, and maybe Attorney Williams can help us.
Yeah, happy to. Rod Williams, Alder Festa, this is, I don't have the paper in front of me, but I can tell you my experience watching the flow of these things over the last, 14 years. We haven't had as many new suits since the pandemic started as we would normally. But very few of them have resolved at the same time because the courts closed. So we're in this, it's sort of almost as though we're sort of treading water for a little bit. So it's not to say there haven't been cases. There's been a little bit less of a flow than what we'd normally see. The federal court did stay open, and so some of those cases continued to progress, but state court virtually stopped. And so we're seeing, I would say, almost a flurry of activity over there. They're really anxiously trying to move things along. So we have many more than we did at the beginning of the pandemic, but the buildup just isn't quite as bad as it would be on a normal year, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And I appreciate that. I guess I'm just concerned because you actually need 325K and some of the fund needs to go to, police misconduct and some civil cases. And I guess I'm just wondering how this money is being dispersed for that. And I know you can't go into the cases themselves since they're being litigated, but we read the media, and I appreciate everything you explained because you did answer a lot of my questions.
All right, if I might respond, Alder Festa, thank you. I was going to bring up your point about the media. I think from the some of the coverage in the media of some of the serious misconduct cases, this is serious, as you noted, employee misconduct. And so labor relations then, and working with the managers and supervisors who have to think about disciplining these employees, the question becomes, if some of this misconduct is so serious that termination is often recommended in these cases. And these termination cases, as I have learned, are very serious cases. And they are like a trial because, the unions represent their employees. It's a serious matter for the employee. There's a lot at stake in terms of, salary, pension, position, things like that. And so they are very hotly contested matters, and they do take on the same level of intensity and skill that is required to put on a trial. And I think from some of the conduct that we have seen, at least reported in the media, we may be able to agree that, some of these employees, some of this misconduct is worthy of termination. I don't want to speak of the employees because I don't want to judge anybody, but just looking at the conduct, it's not an inappropriate response, but the city has to then defend it because it will be challenged.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I just have one other question, and that is, you mentioned that once Attorney Wallach left or retired, there was no one really trained to his caliber about taking on many of these cases. How do you manage corporation counsels, your department, regarding cross-training counsels, so we can have someone that is somewhat trained in other areas other than what they're responsible for? And it might be even complicated because I'm sure their caseloads are also pretty full. But
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Alder Festa.
No, that's it. I'm just curious as to if there is any cross-training with regard to some of these cases and expertise levels. Because once someone leaves, like Attorney Wallach, and there's no one there to pick up the slack.
Well, we do have a gap in terms of Attorney Wallach had been there for 20 years. More than 20 years. We have another attorney who's been there longer than 20 years who primarily practices in state court. And then the 3 other litigators that we have been with us only for a few years. So there's a big gap in terms of the number of years that we have had attorneys in the office. And we do have, as I said, an attorney who did have a little bit of federal experience, and we're now going to be giving those cases to him and trying to get him the exposure and the experience that he needs so that he can develop the expertise. But they all have, as you noted, significant caseloads in addition to the other obligations they have, such as advising departments and boards and commissions. And, COVID has required us all to work on various projects that we wouldn't otherwise have had to spend time on. So we are doing the best we can with the staff we have, but we have just in general a gap of years of experience with the city. So retention would be a good goal for us.
And let's aim for that retention. It sounds like we need it. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Next, we have Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I found my answer in the documents, so I'm all set. I just had a double check.
Thank you, sir.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Alder Rodriguez is not here. Alder Hurt. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Sir. Alder Decker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no questions.
Okay, I have a couple questions. The first question is, I assume that we are getting the same hourly rates from these firms, even though we're, in conjunction with extending the number of hours that we could hire them for. Is that correct?
Yes, there has been no increase in the hourly rate.
And we feel good about those hourly rates still?
Yes.
Wonderful.
There are firms that charge more.
Great. I noticed that the transfer is for $200,000, but the increase in the maximum allowable charges to these 2 firms is $150,500. And so you're transferring almost $50,000 more into your legal services account, more than the increase in authorization for maximum charges to these 2 firms. Are you doing that out of a sense of prudence and just wanting to have a little bit more money on hand in case other legal services agreements go over, or what's the story with that?
The new contract, I'm sorry, this was probably better for Michael Gormany, but I think he's off. And there he is.
I'm here. Yep.
Okay, there you go. I didn't see your face. The faces move around on the screen. I'm sorry.
All right. Vice Chair Marchand, no, good question. So what we can do is we can send through you, Vice Chair Marchand, a breakdown. So as Attorney King mentioned in her testimony, the actual amount needed was $325,000 between the 2 law firms. Now we have the transfer is only $200,000 because we have the remaining funds needed, the additional $125,000 available from the current budget allocation. So we do have funds that are not currently committed to law firms. So that is the reason on why we are transferring $200,000. But we can certainly send you the breakdown this week between what is going to Bertram and what is going to Howd.
Thank you, Mr. Gormany. I think I have realized my error, which is that you're adding 175 to one contract and 150,000 to another. It's not that after money's been added, those contracts are up to 175 and 150. So it's my mistake. I read the resolution and got it wrong, and I appreciate you fixing that for me. So that helps me understand better the reasoning about not transferring the full 325 because of the hoped for outcome that other funds will become available that would make up that difference. So thank you. I apologize for getting the numbers incorrect. Okay. So we have gone through the full roster. I am now going to open it up to the public. Is there a member of the public who wishes to testify on item number 1, the transfer of funds from reserve to Corporation Counsel Legal Services? And I will ask the city staff if they see anybody raising their hands. I myself do not. I see one hand raised. I recognize Patrick Cannon. Sir, would you be able to get on camera with us this evening? I see that he's attempting to unmute and get his camera started, I think. Name
Hello,
and
can you
address
hear
for the record, please. Yes, we can hear you and see you. Thank you.
This is Patrick Cannon, President of Local 825 New Haven Firefighters. I have some concerns. I apologize for getting on this meeting late. What my concerns are, I believe this Finance Committee should do a work progress audit on Labor Director's Office and Corporation Counsel. Throughout the history of this city, we've had major issues that have always occupied Corporation Counsel. To keep allotting more money to go to outside lawyers, I don't think is necessary. With at least do an audit of the work progress that has been done. I understand the panelists that have been on here have explained what a heavy workload it is, but I think that this panel should go deeper and find out what actually they are dealing with, what their hours are. It appears that Mr. Dugas, Floyd Dugas from Bircham Moses, this money is going to him, his firm, and I believe that this panel should look into doing a work progress audit to see what's a work history audit to see what's been done in the past last 2 years. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there other members of the public who wish to testify on item number 1, this transfer? Any other members of the public who wish to testify about this transfer of funds? And for a third time, are there any members of the public who wish to testify on item number 1, this transfer? Seeing no other members from the public wishing to testify, I think we can move on to item number 2. And I thank the members of the Corporation Counsel office for being here, giving the information and answering questions. Thank you so much. I think now we're probably going to hear from Economic Development on item number 2.
I'm sorry. Thank you all very much, and happy holidays and happy new year to everybody if I don't see you all before.
Take care.
All right. Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand. I will just start off with my name and address, Michael Gormley, City Acting Controller, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut. And I believe we have the Economic Development Administrator, Michael Piscatelli.
Morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, I should say. My name is Michael Piscatelli. I'm the Economic Development Administrator. I reside at 353 Summit Street in New Haven, and I believe in your waiting room, if you could also promote Ann Harchin, our deputy from City Plan, as well as Hollis Martins, the Executive Director of the Canaldoc Boathouse Incorporated organization.
Thank you, Mike. And I believe we also have Deputy Economic Development Administrator Carlos Ezagari.
All right, well, if these additional city staff would please introduce themselves by giving their names and addresses for the record, please.
Good evening, Ann Harchin, Assistant Director of Comprehensive Planning, City Plan, 705 Quinnipiac Avenue, New Haven.
Hollis Martins, Executive Director, Canaldoc Boathouse, 111 Stuyvesant Avenue, New Haven.
Hi, everybody. Carlos Ezagiri, 244 McKinley Avenue in New Haven. If you don't mind, I'm going to turn my camera off. I don't think I'm going to be required to testify. I'm making lunch up here for some toddlers, so I don't know if you want to see all that. But if you need me, I'll be here.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Appreciate it. Members of the committee, thank you so much for making a little bit of time for us and also going on the journey as we launch the Boathouse, a truly iconic building out on the waterfront. Many of you have been with this project from its inception, and we're very we're inspired by what is possible down on the waterfront at Long Wharf, particularly coming in light of the approval of the Fusco project over at the Maritime Center, some of the other infrastructure work that we're doing in order to create a truly special community environment for our community. As well that it's been a little bit difficult to get the Boathouse fully off the ground, in part due to the pandemic, which dented the revenue stream for the boathouses, which was reliant in part on the rental of space to support the community programming and the viability of the building and its overall. But part of the overall recovery of the city, the Boathouse is coming out of it as well. Hollis Martins is here to talk a little bit about all of the programming that's been done to date in getting people out on the water, high school students, grade school students, as well as adults using the Boathouse and using our waterfront, particularly for rowing activities. And Ann Harchin and the team from City Plan, who've maintained the building in a state of good repair, in part through the generous support from the board. You'll recall with the fiscal year 22 budget, the board allocated a $50,000 supplemental operating support for the Boathouse, and that's helped with the maintenance costs and the utility bills, certainly set us up for success going forward. So we'll talk a little bit about where we are, what the programming looks like, and then very important for tonight is to set the fee schedule. So now that we're starting to pull back into an events environment and programming the space, we actually need a fee schedule on the books through our code of ordinances. And Ann will talk a little bit about the proposed fee schedule, how it relates to other event and like facilities, and then talk as well a little bit about the planning for 2022 when the building is more fully up and running. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ann for a more complete presentation.
Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand and distinguished alders. My name is Ann Harchin. I am the Assistant Director of Comprehensive Planning and City Plan. We've been working very closely with the Economic Development staff and CDBI, which is Canaldoc Boathouse Incorporated, the nonprofit that was set up to do our programming to get the Boathouse back online for the next year, probably starting at the beginning of the next year. Michael, if you don't mind, if you could share the little presentation that we created, I will walk everybody through it and then we could go through questions at the end.
Happy to do so. If Vice Chair Marchand, if maybe Don could release the screen share, we can throw it up really quick.
That would be great if our staff could make that happen.
Perfect. Excellent. So we have a very quick presentation that I'd just like to run you through to talk a little bit about the boathouse and where we are with it right now. When the facility was built with federal dollars, we made a commitment to the government that we would use the boathouse mainly for public access to the waterfront. In order to do that, we are requesting the ability to create a revolving fund where the contributions from the city plus rental fees from the event spaces would be used in a revolving pattern to fund the community waterfront initiatives and the maintenance and operations of the building. And then funneled back through in a circular pattern. Michael, could we move to the next slide? As part of that equation, we have Canaldoc Boathouse Incorporated, which is the nonprofit that was set up to do the community programming at the boathouse. CDBI is fully integrated into the boathouse at this point. They are having a number of programs that happen throughout the year. This includes a youth rowing program with academic tutoring and athletic mentoring. This is free to City of New Haven public school students. Also includes adult rowing classes. There are also slots held open in those adult rowing classes for free for City of New Haven residents who can't afford to pay for rowing. Yoga classes for 3 seasons. There aren't any now, but in the spring, summer, and fall, you'll see them out on the platform. There are also free slots in those classes for City of New Haven residents. Platform erging or rowing classes as well with the same model. And there are also a number of community boating and kayaking days where people can come down to the boathouse and try out the equipment and get out on the water and get a taste of what's available. Next slide, if you don't mind, Michael. COVID permitting and a good policy in place permitting safe use of the space, we are proposing to relaunch the boathouse and reopen it for community events and planning. If you aren't familiar with the building, the upstairs of the building has office space, but it also has 2 large event spaces. One is much larger than the other. We call that the Lanson Room. We also have a smaller room, which is called the AD Room, which has the working fireplace. And that's the photo on the top left of your slide there. We envision that the space could be rented for small corporate events, large corporate events, weddings, birthdays, showers, and any other number of things. I will tell you that as the recipient of all the emails for inquiries into the space, there are many, many people who would like to rent out the boathouse once we reopen. And I get probably about 20 inquiries a week. I can't tell you how many of those would actually pan out into real reservations, but there is a real need out there and many people are very, very interested in renting the boathouse proper. We did a survey of other similar facilities within the state of Connecticut, including the Glastonbury Boathouse, the Hartford Boathouse, Eolia in Waterford, the Carousel and others, to set or reset the fees for rental. And I believe you all received that in your package. We can go over those fees later if you like in detail. But I will tell you that we did our best to make the fees reasonable for City of New Haven residents, but also competitive with other facilities around, keeping in mind too that we have utility bills that need to be paid. And we would love to be able to generate income as well to help support the CDBI rowing programs. Next slide, please. Some of the facilities at the Boathouse, we have a typical expense roster that you would for a large city building, including all the standard utilities, building maintenance, event management, and assistance to CDBI for their ongoing programming. These are, the outgoing funds, if you will, from the Boathouse. And we would hope that the event space would generate enough and even more income to cover all of these expenses. And the last slide, please. So this is just a quick look at where we are right now. We are currently negotiating or sending through Corporation Council a renewal of the license agreement for CDBI to do our public outreach programming. In the first quarter of the next year, we would like to reopen the event space subject to some very stringent COVID protocols. CDBI will continue to be doing winter programming. Most of the programming right now has to do with the youth outreach Crew Haven program that's going on. In the second quarter, we would like to begin to refine our plans with CDBI and UNH going further. Mr. Piscatelli can tell you a little bit about the discussions with the ongoing discussions with UNH about their marine sciences program. And then next summer, we would like to have the building completely reopened. Obviously, we have to make adjustments for COVID, but we would like to be fully operational again and having events as is safely possible to do so. I have two other documents that we could take a look at depending on your time. I've done a fee comparison of like facilities. If you have questions about our proposed fee schedule, I will say our fee schedule, we tried to give the City of New Haven residents a significant discount off of normal rental rates for the facility. And we tried to be as competitive as possible with other facilities in the area. And also the document that you probably have already received in this packet, which was or is the proposed fee schedule for the building. And I don't know if Hollis, you would like to add some information about your programming or just beef up what I already said about what you're doing in the building, and then we could go back to Mr. Piscatelli.
Absolutely, thank you. And thank you, Board of Alders, for having me this evening. Canaldoc rebooted programming in 2021, the spring of 2021, with an increased focus on community programming. This year we held, as Anne mentioned earlier, we held platform yoga sessions twice weekly and dryland rowing sessions twice weekly. 33% of all slots are reserved for low-income members of the community. So, this is one of the many ways that we're trying to reactivate the space and make it a real communal space instead of a space that people perceive as being more exclusive. We also ran week-long summer camp sessions, learn to row summer camp sessions. We saw 32 young people go through those through camp, and then we modified programming for young people who didn't know how to swim. So that was an additional 8 young people from New Haven that came through for day-long programming. And 80% of all of those young people came through on scholarship, so they didn't have to pay. Thanks to some grant funding that we received, one of which was the yard grant funding through New Haven Youth and Recreation Department. In addition to this, Anne made mention a number of times our new Crew Haven program. And this is a youth development program that has rowing at its core, but it's a youth development program where we've currently enrolled 17 young people from New Haven Public Schools, all coming through here at no cost to learn to row competitively. And also they're receiving tutoring services, they're receiving mentoring services. And this has really just become a safe space for them. We've had 0 attrition since we launched the program in September. So this the Boathouse, and it's at a very small scale, but this is very quickly becoming a community space where young people who are, families who have a higher level of need are taking advantage of this space. And again, we're working really, really hard, and we have bigger plans for 2022 where we want to increase programming. We had 5 community voting days. 146 individuals came through here, and over 70% of them were from New Haven, residents of New Haven. So we're beginning to see a serious volume of New Haveners come through the Boathouse and use the space. And that's it from me for now, unless anybody has any questions.
And Hollis, thank you so much. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Thank you so much for the extra effort in putting the presentation together. The board has seen this a couple of times over, and I hope this gives you a sense for how important a revenue stream through rental income is for the project as a whole. As Ann mentioned, the other key component is the University of New Haven, which had not been able to move forward with the Marine Sciences program, in part due to the pandemic and in part due to the capital fundraise that they were working on. The president of UNH did reach out, and they're looking to open that program for the fall of 22, so the next academic cycle. It's conceivable that they would also bring over the Marine Sciences vessel, which is another exciting addition to the program. But of course, what's most important to us is for them to take possession of the space and then start chipping away at the expense ledger by paying rent for the building. And they would also pay a share of the common area costs. I don't foresee any additional changes to the lease agreement, which the board has previously approved with UNH. But if there are with any changes, you'll see that as part of the budget process for fiscal year 23, together with any ask for an additional operating contribution. But provided, to the extent that the COVID numbers go back down, we maintain good pandemic control. The space is in a really good place and ready to be rented and used by our community. As Ann had mentioned, the fees are in line with other facilities, but there is also a resident carve out. So there's a reduced rate for residents, which we thought was very important and consistent with what we do, say, at the beach and some of our other major facilities. And with that, we'll close the formality of the presentation. Happy to answer any questions that the committee members may have or from the general public.
Thank you, Mr. Piscatelli, Mr. Piscatelli, Ms. Harchin, Ms. Martins, for your presentation. You're correct that we did receive in our packets the schedule of rates that is part of the proposal. We did not, at least I didn't see in the packet that I reviewed, the comparative information. And so if you have the ability to walk us through that quickly, I think it might be enlightening for members of the committee to see that.
Yes, I very much. I can walk you through that if, Michael, if you don't mind bringing that up. I sent you that document. This is not an exhaustive comparison by any means. This is just a few scenarios because I couldn't possibly compare every possible scenario of what we propose to be our fees versus other facilities that are like our own. You will see on the top axis, the x-axis, you'll see the scenario, the proposed fee, that's the fee as additive in the proposed fee schedule. The previous fee that was approved by the Board of Alders for CDBI when they were running the event space. A comparison with the carousel at Lighthouse Park, the Glastonbury Boathouse, which is a very similar facility to our own, the Hartford Boathouse, which is similar but a little less, fewer amenities than we have. They don't have a kitchen there, and they have a slightly smaller space. And then Eolia, which is a Connecticut deep run facility in Waterford. So the first scenario was a daytime small conference on a weekday with 50 people for 4 hours. So our proposed fee there would be $850 for a resident or a corporation with a New Haven address, $950 for out-of-town folks. The previous fee for that same space was approved at $1,000. The carousel would be a little over $2,000 or almost $2,500 for out-of-towners for the same kind of event. The Glastonbury Boathouse charges, and these are based on last summer's numbers, so these have all maybe increased slightly, $750, the Hartford Boathouse $525, and Aeolia $650. The second scenario is a peak season wedding on a Thursday night, which is not a normal night for weddings, but I thought I'd run both scenarios. 130 people for 5 hours, because that seems to be the size of wedding that people are making inquiries about the space to me. So this would be between $1,750 and $2,200 under this fee schedule. The previous fee would have been $1,750. The carousel for the same event is between $3,800 and $4,300. The Glastonbury Boathouse, $2,500. The Hartford, $2,600. And Aeolia, which is $5,100. Now, Aeolia, you only rent the entire space or you rent nothing. So it's a little bit of apples and oranges there. The third scenario is for a peak season wedding on a Saturday night for 130 people for 5 hours. Our proposed fee is around the $5,000 range. The previous approved fee was $3,550. The carousel for that same event would be between $3,800 and $4,300. The Glastonbury Boathouse, $4,700. Hartford, $4,200. And Aeolia, again, $5,100. For an exterior only event on the platform here at the Boathouse is very, very large and can easily fit probably 400 people. But I did a scenario on a Saturday night with 200 people for 4 hours. So the fee would be either $3,100 or $3,500. The previous approved fee was $6,000. The carousel isn't really comparable because it is essentially outside space with the way that building is set up. The Glastonbury Boathouse is not truly comparable because they charge $300 an hour, but only before 2 p.m. And then the other two scenarios don't play out either. The boat storage rates for rowing shells versus kayaks, between $500 and $600 and $200 to $225 for residents and non-residents. The previous approved fees for those same items were $500 and $200, so similar to the resident fee now. Glastonbury Boathouse is about $50 to $100 more expensive, and neither the Hartford Boathouse nor Aeolia actually allow boat storage. So this was just a scenario I ran out. I will say that the average rental at the carousel now is somewhere around, in 2019 was around $5,000, and that is any night of the week. They don't differentiate at the carousel between days of the week in terms of the amount charged for any given space.
Thank you for that information. Anything else that the staff would like to say before we have questions from committee members?
No, thank you again for the time, and we'll all stay on the call to answer questions now from the committee and any from the general public.
Thank you very much. So we will go through our roll, starting with Alder DeCola.
I have no questions at this time, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I do have a one question. What is the I guess outreach protocol to drum up interest in rowing and use of the canal dock? I mean, I think the canal for many years, there are people that have not really utilized it and would like to, especially seeing the beautiful new building. And, I get a lot of questions all the time. How do you get in that place? And, the word on the street is, oh, it's really expensive. And so when you get that kind of language and, oh, it's really expensive, people tend to turn their heads. But it's such a beautiful asset in our city, and that I would really like to encourage the members of my ward. I live in the Dixville community, to want to utilize this space in various ways, and not just for rental, but as you were going over, the director was going over all the different type of things that families and young people have done in utilizing that space. I'm just very interested in what is that protocol, or what do your efforts look like in trying to engage, and not just what do those efforts look like, who are we engaging? So if any of that makes any sense, as far as, and I don't know if the executive director or if the woman from City Plan would take that.
I can take that if you don't mind, Dan. So full disclosure, we're a nonprofit. We have a very lean budget, as most nonprofits do. So our marketing and outreach budget is very, very slim. That said, we have partnered with a number of the community management teams, not all of them, but if anybody on this call would like to make an introduction, we'd be more than willing to send information to more CMTs. But we've also been partnering with New Haven Public Schools. So we've had email blasts and text message blasts being sent out by Daniel Diaz to parents of all high school students in New Haven Public Schools, just alerting them of our community programming when we're recruiting. Right now, we're going to be recruiting for 3 additional youth to enter in January, and more than likely we'll be tapping into our partners at the public school system. We also have a small but well-connected email list too. So that's how a lot of the CMTs get information out to their constituents.
Okay, I do like that you said that you're utilizing the CMTs, and it would be very helpful if outreach happened to all the CMTs as a way, because through that process there will be other connections that can be made, because again, we in our city, we want everyone to know that it's open to enjoy all these wonderful assets. And then when I hear about the opportunity of rowing and things of that sort, I'm born and raised in New Haven. I didn't know anything about rowing until I went to BU in Boston, and on the Charles River, you see all these people. I'm like, that looks interesting, but it was never introduced into my community. And now that we do have the Boathouse that's a part of the New Haven community, I really feel really strongly about introducing young people, to something so different. And, nothing against anyone, but, like the emails and stuff don't always get it. We have to maybe figure out a way of the partnering through the use of other young people to encourage, other young people to get involved. Because when I look at rowing, I think scholarships. I think college and I think scholarships. And if this is something that, we can introduce all of our young people in New Haven, because we do have New Haven students that don't go to school in New Haven. And so if that's the case, they wouldn't receive this kind of information. So I just, for me, it's really important that we make this a very inclusive for the entire city, because it's definitely a excellent sport, and a sport that young people, or not just young, whoever, can utilize to help them get to a next step. So thank you for your answer, and thank all of you for your presentation tonight.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Alder Walker Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I know I'm supposed to have a question, but I always start out with a statement until I get to my question. I think it's really important that we do have a different rate for New Haven residents. So I definitely appreciate that. I'm just thinking about, COVID impacted stuff last year, and it seems to me that it's not over, and it's still impacting us in a huge way right now. And I know I heard you say that it's a lot of people that have interest in utilizing the Boathouse for various reasons. And I guess to kind of piggyback off of Alder Morrison's question is one, what kind of COVID-19, I guess, protocols will be used if we start, open it up and having more weddings and more things like the different scenarios that you explained to us.
Yeah, if I may, we have not figured that out yet. And obviously we would consult with the health department and the mayor's office and, all the different agencies within the city that could give us advice on that. To answer your question, we don't know. And I think that's why we have been somewhat okay with the fact that, our fee schedule has been delayed, because we see the numbers rising and it concerns us. And we have debated many times internally, is now the time to open the Boathouse? And then as soon as we are inching towards yes, we see another spike. So we've been very cautious, but honestly, we can't carry the building forever without generating some income, because the city owns the building and it takes money just to keep the building, the lights on in the building. So I would say we intend to proceed cautiously. I don't have a great answer for you at this time, but we would confer with all professional staff who could give us input on that.
Thank you. And I thank you for your honesty. I think it's something we should, start thinking about, especially since, right, the building can't just sit there. We have to have it utilized in a certain way. And I think if we start thinking about what those protocols actually will look like, that'd be helpful when we're out there encouraging people to use the facility. Thank you. I'm all set, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker Myers. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand. I do have some questions, and I'll just also piggyback on what President Walker Myers said. Facilities are open out there. There's plenty of venues that are hosting weddings, et cetera. So yes, we need to start generating more revenue. And with that in mind, what did we generate? What was generated with all of these programs that were initiated over the summer? You mentioned, I saw some pricing, there was like $10 per class for yoga, rowing was $10 per class. Have people taken advantage of the rental for kayaks and canoes? And what did we generate with that? Is there someone who is maintaining the budget as well as, an endowment? So if someone could touch on that, that would be really helpful.
I can start with that. There is no endowment for the building. And to be clear, CDBI as the nonprofit partner of the city that is doing program. Their mandate is not to generate income. Their mandate is to generate programming for the citizens of New Haven and to get people out on the water. Part of our problem has been that our partnership with UNH has not manifested itself to this date. They were going to be a key partner in helping to pay for some of the building costs. And then we also, obviously with COVID, we haven't had any events since I would say January of 2020. Hollis, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So that's where we are. Hollis can speak to what income they've generated, but CDBI, to be correct about it, is not in part of their mandate to generate income.
So there was a small amount of revenue that was generated through yoga classes and dryland rowing. We don't do kayak or canoe rentals. Our insurance doesn't cover it, and it's sort of not part of how we envision ourselves operating. The money that was generated, and again, it was a very small amount. I would say, I don't have our budget in front of me, but I would say in the $10,000 to $15,000 range, was rolled directly into providing community programming. So when I talk about 80% of youth that went to summer camp on scholarship, $25,000 of that was covered by the yard grant, but additional funding like from yoga, paying $10 for yoga classes also helped to support scholarships for young people to go through Learn to Row camp and other activities like our community boating days, which again, I think a little over 150 people attended at no cost.
You know what? Oh, is that me echoing? Can you hear me? Am I echoing?
No, you're good.
Okay. I misspoke. I meant boat storage, the rowing shell, the kayak, canoe, paddle board, not rental, but the storage. Sorry.
Yeah, again, not a large volume of income came through that. If I had to guess, it was be under $2,000. But again, all of the money that we bring in goes directly to increasing community programming. Our agreement with the city of New Haven was that 33% of youth who went through our summer camps would go through on scholarship. Because we are able to earn that type of income, we can increase the number of youth that go through on scholarship. And this year it was 80%. Next year, let's go for 90%.
So while I appreciate all the programming and it should continue, obviously, because that is an asset to our city and our youth and it keeps them off the streets, we still need to generate revenue to run this building. So while I appreciate, CBI not wanting to generate revenue, I don't feel that that's a really good it doesn't make financial sense to me. And maybe I'm just not understanding how it works. I'm hoping that the rental of the space through whatever conferences, weddings, parties, whatever, is going to generate revenue that can be used to maintain it and self-sustain it, so the city can get off of the take away that financial burden of having to run it. And I'm my Alder in Alder Morrison with the Q House has done a great job in organizing somewhat of an endowment. She could correct me if I'm wrong, she can speak on it, but I'm hoping it's going to run something like that, as well as the carousel, as well as our ice skating rink and our golf course. That's how I envision the Canal Boathouse functioning. So while I appreciate that the funding, is being used for programming and that needs to continue, additional funding needs to be also generated in order to maintain the facilities as they exist. So, with that being said, maybe we do need an endowment. What do the fees include? So if I were to, well, I'm already married, But let's say, I want to throw a big bash there, and what does it include for me to have, I don't know, a Friday night party, for example?
For example, if you were throwing, say, a big legacy birthday party and you had 200 guests, you could rent the larger room for 4 hours on, hold on, let me make sure. What night of the week were we talking about here?
Well, let's say Friday night.
Friday. Okay.
Should we have a party Friday night?
Friday night party, 5 hours, which would be exclusive use of the large room, which holds, I think the occupancy of that room is around 250 people per fire code. It would include 2.5 hours setup and breakdown. So if you were renting outside furniture, we have some furniture here, but if you were renting outside furniture, your vendors could bring things in. You'd have to pay a nominal fee if you had a caterer using the kitchen. But otherwise it would be $3,500, and then you could purchase additional hours for up to $600 an hour. And all told, that would include security and management of the space, use of the bathrooms. We have a coat room here. I'm trying to think what else. You probably don't want to go outside, but there is a balcony platform. And that's what it would cost.
Okay, so it includes cleaning fees.
Yeah. We tried to.
Sorry, rental person would not have to, let's say it's me. I wouldn't have to clean up after.
No.
So it includes all of that. Okay. And I thought the Boathouse couldn't have a kitchen. So it does have a kitchen.
It has a warming kitchen that you can have a caterer. You can hire a caterer to bring food in that's already cooked. You can't cook in the kitchen. So there are proofing boxes. I'm not an events person, so I'm just telling you what I know. We have a refrigerator, we have an ice maker, we have proofing boxes so a caterer can bring in warm food and then serve from this kitchen, but it's not a cooking facility. It's just a prep/warming facility.
Okay, well, I appreciate that because I was a little confused. Let's see, the UNH question was addressed. Advertising, I think you addressed that. How do we advertise? And I'm just going through my list. Oh, AMI, you mentioned that the scholarships are based on AMI. What AMI do we use? Is there a number we go by? Is there?
I think we wrote something specific into the contract policy, but since you're the person who is regulating that, I'll let you speak to that issue.
So we do use the City of New Haven AMI. I can't recall the number off the top of my head, but to be honest with you, we're holding people on the honor system. I'm not asking people to produce their EBT cards or pay stubs. If somebody comes to us and said it's been a really hard year, but I'd really like to do some yoga, that's sort of our indicator of this person probably needs some yoga. But the New Haven AMI is what we typically use. If we
not the regional one.
No.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate your efforts in trying to make all of this work under a very challenging circumstance. So thank you all. Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand.
Thank you, Alder Anafesta. Alder, I see that Alder Furlow has stepped out for a moment. Alder Rodriguez is not with us at the moment. Alder Hertz is also not with us at the moment. Alder Decker, do you have questions? Alder Decker is not responding at the moment. What I'm going to do is move to the public portion on this item. And of course, if Alders, I see a hand being raised by Alder Morrison. One more question, please.
Yes, just one more question. One of the things that popped up for me is that when Alder Festa was asking questions about the money that we're generating and things of that sort, is there any way, I know you have your fee schedule, and I know that's, part of the reason why we're here, but is there any way that we could treat the boathouse almost like the cruise lines are treating their boats? You can get a cruise today for like $200. And I know that's not the regular price, just like you guys have your fee schedule and the prices are the prices. But where we are right now, we need to generate money, right? And it's almost like one of those things to me. It seems like one of those things, if right now we can give like these unbelievable prices, not this fee schedule that you just outlined, but come up with these unbelievable prices for use of the space for a certain amount of time, this is something that will help to generate cash to come into the facility. People get an opportunity to see how great the facility is. And then as time goes on, you really go into your real fee schedule that's going to bring in the big money, especially with the fact that like the UNH deal has not really kicked in right now. We need money, right? You need cash. And so, that is always the best way to get people into certain things that they wouldn't necessarily pay for. If they can, it's almost like if you can go to the Taj Mahal for $50, it's like, oh, I'm going, I don't care what I got to do. You know what I mean? So that just came to mind, and it's really a question. Is that something that we can do? Can we offer these ridiculous prices to really get people really amped up about utilizing the space so you guys can begin to generate some cash? And I don't know who that goes to. The executive director, the city.
That's interesting,
I'll
right?
start. Wait, can I just say, I'll just say something very quickly. With all due respect, Alder Morrison, I think if we just opened the building, that I'm getting so many emails of so many people who want to rent the space.
Oh,
that
okay.
I don't think we need to have any kind of a fire sale. I think it's
Okay.
the problem is, how do we safely open the space? I don't think it's a question of lack of demand. I think
Okay.
for us, it's a question of safety.
Oh, okay. All right. I just heard when, Alder Festa was talking about the fees and bringing in money and all these different things. That's the first thing that came to my mind. Like, if the demand isn't there like we initially thought, and then when the comment was made that UNH didn't come through like initially planned, to me, I'm like, okay, we need cash. How do we get cash? And the way you get cash is, like you said, you have a fire sale. But so that's not the issue. You have more of an issue with the health department and what they consider to be appropriate or not, or whatever the situation is. Okay, so you already got your generation of money. You just want to open the door. So that's my only question, Alderman Shaw. Did you want to say something?
If you don't mind. And frankly, it's just that we've been waiting to get a fee schedule approved so that we could even consider opening the building, because we couldn't charge anything until we have a fee schedule. It's like chicken or the egg question, right?
Right. Right. Okay. All right. Good. Well, thank you. I'm glad to know that we have a lot of people ready to party and to, need to celebrate. That's right. Thank you.
Or party or both.
All of it, right?
Spend some money to rent.
Spend money. Yes. Thank you very
Alder
much.
Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Decker, do you have any questions for the city staff in regards to the Canaldoc Boathouse item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't, and I think my microphone is now working, hopefully.
Yes, we can hear you just fine. Thank you so much. All right, so I'm going to move to the public portion on this item. And I would ask the city staff just and Ms. Martins to hold on just a moment in case we need you to respond to something that comes up. Does anybody from the public wish to testify on this item? I don't see very many members of the public, so I'm just going to do this quickly. Does any member of the public wish to testify on this item? And for a third time, would any member of the public wish to testify on this item? Seeing none, we will now move to our third and fourth items. And before we do, let's thank Mr. Piscatelli. I can't speak this evening. Let me thank the city staff and Ms. Martins for their presentations.
And thank you for the time tonight. Very much
Thank you.
appreciate it.
So now I think, Mr. Gormany, the floor is yours for our monthlies.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Marchand. If Mr. Hayden can give me share screen, I will share a copy of the monthly report. Since we're on a new item, Michael Gormany, Acting Controller, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut. Okay, let me just. Okay, thank you for your time tonight. Again, as Vice Chair Marchand mentioned, there are two monthlies on the agenda. We're going to go right to the most recent one that was submitted as of October of 2021. So looking at the October of 2021 monthly financial report, as you can see, we were reporting a deficit as of that month, which we'll go through in a few more minutes within the various accounts related to general fund. We are projecting about a $6.5 million deficit. Again, this is consistent in what we see in previous years where we may see a deficit and then have various ways of reducing that deficit as we get towards the end of the fiscal year. But as of October 2021, this is currently what we are reporting. So I'm gonna just go through some of the monthly reports, some of the high level areas within the report on general funds, ARPA, CARES Act, and the medical self-insurance fund and city vacancies. So starting with the American Rescue Plan, again, the board approved $26.3 million back in the summertime related to the American Rescue Plan spending. To date, we have spent $2.9 million and still have about $1.6 million committed towards those programs, which leaves a balance of about 21.6. As you can see, a majority of that was really geared towards revenue loss, which in fiscal year 21, we only ended up using about less than $1 million within that category. There have been some questions on the next round of funding for the American Rescue Plan. As you know, we submitted the $12 million that this board heard for IT infrastructure related to public safety and quality of life overtime. The city is currently working on a plan to hopefully submit soon to the Board of Alders. We are looking at these current balances plus the unallocated balances left within the American Rescue Plan. We did receive approval of $115 million when you look at the direct allocation and the county portion allocation of the American Rescue Plan. So my office, along with Mike Piscatelli, who is running the programming side of the American Rescue Plan, are currently working on the overall plan for the remaining funds for the American Rescue Plan. So again, we hope to submit that relatively soon to the Board of Alders. Again, that's a plan that will sort of look at the grand scheme of what the administration plans to do with the remaining amount of money. But like any plan, of course, when you have multi-year funding, that is always subject to change based on the needs of the city in any future years. So going to the CARES Act funding, in April of 2020, we did receive approval of $6.3 million of CARES Act funding. Again, with the city being transparent, we really want to just show where that money is being spent and what it's being allocated towards. So the next few pages on the monthly report, starting with this particular page, which is 8 of 71, kind of gives a high-level overview of the different categories of the CARES Act, which consisted of CDBG, ESG, and HOPWA, and then the overall budget categories, which public safety, shelter, basic needs, so on and so forth. And what we did was kind of roll that up into the agencies where the money was allocated, so the Alders and the public can get a sense of what we're spending the CARES Act money on. We did receive another round of CARES Act money, which was $3.1 million from the state. That will be included in the next monthly report. If you remember, in December of 2020, my office submitted an allocation of $3.1 million, which was funding from the state CARES Act, which was really geared towards public safety personnel and overtime related to the response and COVID-related activities. So that particular report will be in the next monthly report, as we did submit the final report to the Office of Policy and Management in October. But to be very perfectly honest and transparent, forgot to submit that particular report within this monthly. So that will certainly be included in the next monthly report. Moving on to the general fund. So we're going to look at the revenue side of the general fund and what we're currently trending towards for the fiscal year. So this first page that you're looking at is where we're trending in taxes. So through October, we have collected about 53% of the overall budget. As you know, taxes are due in July. In January is when we collect the bulk of the taxes. And then we do have other tax categories such as delinquent taxes, which were taxes that were not paid or outstanding accounts, and supplemental motor vehicle taxes, which are due in January. And those are vehicles that hit the tax rolls after the initial grand list period that made up the bills that were due in July. But right now we are trending to be ahead of last year. So with COVID, our collection rate overall, not on a budgetary standpoint, but on a collection rate standpoint, was a little bit less than 98%. We are trending to be just slightly above 98% with tax collections this year. So that's a good story for us. Looking at some of the overall revenue categories by section. So this is section 1 of general taxes. This will be adjusted, again, to sort of reflect what I was just talking about with the current tax collection period. We are expecting, like in previous years, for the tax collection budget to be above what we budgeted. So last fiscal year, we were a little bit over $2 million in ahead of budget. In the previous year, we were about $3 million pre-COVID and going into COVID within that fiscal year. So in the next monthly report, you'll see this number adjusted based on the trend of where we are with taxes. In the next section, state grants, again, we are anticipating receiving all our state grants. We have not received any indication that we will not. As you can see, the biggest change on here was tiered pilot, which replaced the state property in the college and hospital. We did receive the $91.2 million in tiered pilot from the state. In our license permits and fees, there are really two revenue categories that we watch. Building permits, which in working with the building official, we are projected to be slightly ahead of budget. Again, that's something that I monitor with the building official on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. You know, it's no secret, we've continued to have success in economic development in New Haven, which has generated building permits for the city. Meter receipts is one of our localized revenues that has been really hit hard by COVID. That is one that I continue to work with and look forward to working with our new TT&P director and his staff on seeing what we can do. Again, we did start to see an uptick in meter receipts around April of this year, and that has sort of flatlined. And again, you know, we have a spike in COVID, we have other restrictions that may or may not come back, but that is one revenue category that we do continue to see hit hard by COVID. So that is one that I am not expecting to hit budget for this fiscal year. It may be, and we will continue to forecast that accordingly as we continue throughout the fiscal year. In section 4, and I'm not sure if I passed it, I'm sorry. Section 4, the one I want to really touch base on was parking tax, which is really the same story as meter receipts. Again, this was one of our local revenues that was really impacted by COVID and continues to be impacted by COVID. So we will continue to make adjustments within that revenue category as we continue on with the fiscal year. So overall on revenue, we are looking at about a $2.7 million shortfall. Again, we do have some good stories that are coming in regards to taxes, and hopefully building permits will continue strong throughout the fiscal year, which may be able to cover some of those shortfalls as well. And we also have the $4 million accounted for as far as the announcement with Yale on the additional voluntary as well. So that may generate additional funding for fiscal year 22 that will cover some of the anticipated shortfall as well. Moving on to the expense side of the budget. Sorry, my mouse here. So on the top section, we are ahead in overall gross overtime, which is primarily police and fire. And again, this is gross overtime, which is what this chart shows. So this does not include any reimbursements that may be seen, which is primarily seen in the police budget itself. So looking at it from a city standpoint, right now what we're really looking at are our medical costs, which has a direct impact on general fund. That is the area, and I know it's a little hard to see, but that's actually a negative $4 million because it's over budget by about $4 million. We continue to be impacted by our medical claims, which I'll get into towards the end of the report, but that is one of the primary drivers, again, of the deficit that we're seeing within the city right now. So that's something that we're going to continue to keep an eye on within the city. Our Board of Education is getting their first monthly projection together, which will be in their next few finance and operations meetings. So we should have a sense on where the Board of Ed is at during the fiscal year. I've been talking to their interim CFO and the business directors to try to get a sense of where we're trending at as far as maybe a deficit or a surplus. As you know, we do have transportation issues that we're working out at the Board of Ed, and we do have some other contractual costs. So again, they're getting together their first projection report for their Finance and Operations Board. Again, it takes a little bit longer because we have to get the teachers in place, we have to get all the transportation in place, all the tuition in place. So that's something that really happens towards November for the Board of Ed to see where they're really trending. One of the things at the last meeting that we were going to talk about was just our vacancies. So currently we have 87 vacancies within the city, full-time vacancies, and that's just on the general fund. We're looking at revenue generating vacancies and looking at departmental need as we try to fill some of these positions. Again, this is general fund, so these are really tested positions that have to go through the entire civil service process. So it's not, you know, it's not in 2 weeks we'll have folks hired. Again, and we also have limited staff in our human resources department. Most of these, because they're non-sworn, do not cost us any money to test, because it's really HR working with a lot of the department heads or their deputies to develop the test, look at the job requirements, so on and so forth. But again, with the city's limited staffing at the moment, you know, it is taking a little bit longer to fill some of these vacancies. The question, I believe, at the last meeting was on some of the executive management positions. We did start to fill those. As you've seen in the news, we filled the CAO, LCI, TTMP vacancies. So, you know, we do have a few more executive management positions that we're currently working on, along with a recruiter to fill and conducting some of the interviews. But again, so vacancies and hiring is something that, you know, we continue to look at the city as we try to be competitive with other municipalities as well from a salaries and benefits standpoint. Again, we have very good benefits, but a lot of some of the other municipalities have benefits have come close enough to where it's really, you know, people are choosing a monetary, are choosing the monetary value of the position. And I know during some of the finance committees, you've heard it from other departments as well, such as OBIE on competitive salaries. But we continue to try to fill all the vacancies, but we are at a high number of vacancies with 87. And again, this is non-sworn, so this does not include police vacancies or our suppression, which are firefighters and which are firefighter positions and fire lieutenants and captains. Just to wrap up, because I know it's been a long night. I think I went to the wrong page. Okay, I apologize. I was trying to go to, here it is. Workers' compensation, again, at the last meeting, I did mention, you know, we were behind, but that was partially due, you know, we did switch third-party administrators, and there was a transition period between our previous workers' comp administrator that works with the city and our new one. So we did catch up, as you can see, on basically in October and November on what we had seen. We continue to work on workers' comp policy and return to work and other areas to save the city money. If, as you can see, based on the previous year and being flat, we would spend about $8 million, which is about $400,000 more than the previous year, but less than our average since fiscal year 11-12. So again, we will continue to work on workers' compensation and continue to try to save money for the city. And the last piece of the monthly report, again, is our medical cost. This is something that we continue to monitor. As you can see, we are about $7.9 million more than the previous year in actual claims. But as you know, last fiscal year and towards the end of the previous fiscal year were really COVID related. So obviously that plays a part in how we look at these medical costs. We did work with our third-party medical consultant, along with myself and Steve Labrandy in Human Resources, and we did take a look at COVID costs versus normalized costs within medical. So just to give you a sense, over a rolling 12-month period, so looking at October 2020 to October 2021, we spent a little bit above $7 million in actual COVID costs. But that included testing and claims, and that's the overall COVID world for the city of New Haven. As we talked about previously, with employees beginning their daily routines on going to the doctor and dentist and other medical appointments, that did increase the cost for the city. So we are seeing additional costs in medical treatments and other areas of medical that is making up that other difference. Now, interestingly enough, which you'll see in the next monthly report, we did see in the month of November medical costs go down. So that is something that Steve Labrandy and I are looking at, is did we really hit the peak of when we've seen an increase in this fiscal year, and are we going to level out? That's something that we're going to take a look at in the next couple of months as we continue to see medical claims and evaluate what is COVID related and what is everything else related to medical care for city employees and retirees. But again, I think one of the things we did see again is in our preliminary numbers is November kind of level off from this increase that we've seen in the first 4 months. So that's something that I will certainly keep my eye on and keep this board updated on. So on the revenue side for medical, we are seeing about the same amount of revenue as last year when it comes to outside revenue. So that's primarily employee cost share and funding from grants. And a bulk of the revenue is this $90.7 million number, which is the general fund number. So as I mentioned in the beginning, that deficit is going to fluctuate during the fiscal year, especially as we continue to look at medical claims related to COVID, because whatever the ending claims number is what we have to cover. So that is covered by the outside, by all this revenue, and whatever all the revenue, outside revenue and prescription rebate does not cover, the general fund has to make up. So if we need more general fund revenue, that's going to obviously increase the contribution from the general fund side. So that's something that we're going to continue to watch during the fiscal year. And as far as high claim costs go, we do have more high claim costs, which is part of the medical care that, again, I had mentioned earlier, that Steve Labrandy and I are looking at along with Anthem and our medical consultant. But we did have more high cost claims. And again, I think that's with the pandemic, everyone going to the doctors, medical ailments that may be taken care of, or just medical conditions that may be found as you're, getting your checkup or whatever the case is. But we did see higher high cost claims when you compare it to fiscal year 2021. So Vice Chair Marchand, I know that was a lot of information, but I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gormany. We appreciate the presentation. We are going to proceed now to questions from committee members, starting with Alder DeCola.
I have no questions at this time. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir. Alder Morrison.
No questions at this time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Alder Walker Myers.
No questions at this time, Mr. Vice Chair. That was a lot of information all at once.
Alder Festa.
Yes. Thank you, Vice Chair. I do have credit. That was a lot of information all at once, and my brain is all over the place, and so are my notes. But I saw, okay, you addressed the licenses, permits, and fees that had that 7.89 on page 17. But we don't have to go there. I'm looking at parking tags. Who generally rents those out?
So I think parking tags is a combination of different areas. So parking tags are the tickets that the parking enforcement officers write that you see when there's no money in the meter or whatever the case is. But they also have other tickets that they write. And then again, another one of those that you're talking about is the meter bag.
Yeah,
revenue,
that's what I
which
meant.
also makes up that number. That's mainly contractors that are doing development within the city. They're usually the ones that are renting out those parking spaces, which is when you see that the meters covered by those yellow bags. But I believe that is primarily when there's construction going on. And they need to reserve those spaces primarily for their vehicles or to make sure there's no interference with that particular project. But from my understanding, that's mainly contractors doing work in the city.
Okay, and have we lost revenue there? Because there is a lot of work being done in the city, and I'm sorry, I could have been looking at the wrong numbers and I didn't write the page number.
So I am just going to quickly scroll and give you the page number to look at.
And it could be 17. But, while you're looking at that,
yeah, we do. There is a summary page, which is page 16. And on that page, you'll see it basically compares meter bags from fiscal year 15-16 until the current fiscal year. We are down in meter bags at the moment by about 100,000 when you compare fiscal year 2020 and 2021. But again, it depends on the construction project going on. Not every project requires you to have meter bags on that project. So again, it just depends on the scope of the work being done.
Okay. So it's 100K. You mentioned the 4 million. So when we ended our budget last year, we were 4 million that we still had to make up. And you mentioned if the contribution goes through with Yale, that will cover some of that. What other shortfalls were you talking about that might be impacted, where we would need those funds?
Well, since we're talking about the general fund, you can only apply it to whatever current year, because wherever you end the year just gets applied towards the fund balance. So the agreement with the voluntary would really cover whatever shortfalls in whatever category. So like we just mentioned, parking tags and meter receipts, right? We're expecting a shortfall there. So that can potentially cover that. If it's the same way of when we see a overage in tax collections, you know, essentially that can cover the shortfall in whatever area we see in revenue. So I think as we're trending on during the fiscal year, I think we can better gauge on what shortfalls that would be covering. And again, we have expenditure savings that will be adjusted during the fiscal year that may also cover some of those revenue shortfalls as well. So.
And I know it's still hard to see what those shortfalls will be, considering there's a lot of factors that we're still waiting on, tax collection being one of them. But okay, I appreciate it. We can touch on that at a later date. I think I have a concern about, you said Board of Ed, and you said they're still working on their budget, but deficit versus surplus. So there might be a deficit even with all this funding that they're receiving. And there's a shortfall in there's vacancies there as well with teachers, and just wondering what is being factored in with the Board of Ed.
No, that's a great question, Alder Festus. So I think you kind of hit it within your question. I think one of the things that they're looking at is how they're applying their ESSER funds, because their federal funding is a little bit more flexible than the federal funding that we receive here at the city. As I mentioned before, it's really about transportation and personnel. Again, they do have vacancies, as you mentioned, that may offset some of their expenses, but they do have increased contractual costs as well that are going up. And again, their biggest costs are really transportation and tuition and personnel on their side. So again, they're trying to retain teachers, and they have open contracts in other areas similar to what we have on the city. So I think they're working through all that at the moment. And, you know, because they do affect the city's bottom line, because their surplus or deficit rolls into the city, I am keeping in constant contact with their interim CFO over there and their business office. But I think theirs is a little bit more complex just because of the start of school, and it's not like us on a general fiscal, even though they're on a fiscal year, they can't gauge it until all teachers are in place, all bus routes are in place. We know where we're paying tuition in other cities are really going. So I think they're finally factoring all of that into play.
Okay.
But I honestly don't know if they're running a surplus or a deficit, because they're just getting into that at the moment.
Okay, so I guess we have to be patient with that. Although we are, in general, halfway through. I mean, it is December. July to December is 6 months. So do we look like we're on track? Are we looking okay so far? General fund budget wise, I saw that our vacancies are really high. That was a scary page you showed us, particularly with healthcare for the schools, the nurses, and we've had this conversation during the budget too, regarding pay scale versus benefits, and or I should say salary versus benefits. And we heard those answers in the past, but can you speak on that? I'm sure, do we have applicants?
We do. And again, I think it's really just the city staff right now is, to the max right now on just various projects and everything, including human resources. So again, with general fund, it's really the civil service process, and Steve Labrandi's office is really an office of, I believe, 6 to 8 people, somewhere around there. So we have a lot of testing and everything going on. So I think it's really just trying to get the jobs posted, going through the applicant screening, conducting the civil service process. That's a couple of month process. And again, with limited staffing, we're really focusing in on departmental needs and trying to get as much done as we can. But that's kind of where we are. And then, we also have public safety testing, which takes up a lot of time just because of the intricacies of what goes into a firefighter test or a police entry test or a police captain. So that can easily take up, even though we have consultants who work with us on that, we still need staff to work with those consultants and, make sure everything is being done to the HR standards. So that takes time in itself as well. So there's a lot going on as far as the testing and the HR process, but we really are trying to fill as many jobs as we can because we also realize that not having these jobs also can put a stress on the current workforce as well.
Yes, indeed. And I appreciate all that you do. I know you're spread thin as well.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And in the midst of all that, I'm not sure I got an answer regarding how we're looking so far in the 6 months that we've been in this fiscal year. And I may have missed it and I apologize. And
No,
that will
that's fine.
thank you.
No, no problem, Alder Festa. Yeah, so again, as I mentioned, if we ended at the moment right now, based on what the report shows, we would be looking at about a $6.9 million deficit. But again, we also have the ARPA funding, and I would also have to see how much of that ARPA funding could be applied towards that deficit. One of the things in these reports that we always try to adjust every month or every 2 months are savings. So again, like for example, in the police department, there's, based on the numbers that my office did last week, we do have more savings than what's shown in this report. So since we ran through the month of November. So again, it's a bunch of different factors like that. But again, if we ended right now at the numbers in this report, it would be 6.9 million before we applied what we could from ARPA.
Okay, I do remember seeing that number, so thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. I see that Alder Furlow has stepped away. Alder Hurt, do you have any questions for Mr. Gormany? No, he apparently doesn't at the moment. Alder Decker.
I have no questions. Mr. Chair, thank you as always, Acting Controller Gormany, for your thorough presentation.
Thank you, Alder Decker. Mr. Gormany, I'm not going to get into detail at this point, but I was looking at those last few pages around medical. It's been the concern of mine and many others that a lot of care was delayed or avoided altogether during the pandemic, understandably so, given the need to preserve clinical capacity to stay out of harm's way. And I think we might be seeing the effect of delayed care. And so, that'll be a conversation I'll take up with Steve Librandi at some point. And I'm sure that the city's consultant and Anthem probably have some opinions on that, although it may be too early to know for sure. But I think we have to prepare ourselves for the smooth sailing of medical the last few years not being smooth anymore. I think we have to be ready for things to get pretty bumpy at this point.
I agree, Alder Vice Chair Marchand. Absolutely.
So I'm going to see if there are any members of the public who wish to give testimony on items 3 and 4, the monthlies for the month of September and October. Asking again, would any member of the public wish to testify on the monthly reports for September and October? And for a third time, would any members of the public wish to testify on these monthly financial reports? Seeing none, a motion to close the public portion would be appropriate.
I move that we close the public section.
Second.
Second.
The motion to close the public portion of the meeting has been moved and seconded. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder DeCola.
Yes.
Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Walker Myers,
Yes.
Alder Festa,
Yes.
Alder Hurt,
Yes.
Alder Decker.
Yes.
The motion carries. The public portion is over. We are now ready to entertain motions.
I'm already done with my phone.
Oh, great.
Let me see if I had anything.
So a motion on item 1 would be appropriate.
I move item 1.
Second.
Item 1, which is the transfer and the authorization to increase those legal services contracts, has been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? I see Alder Morrison and then Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I agree. I stand in support of this transfer. As the alder that at one time was appointed to look at contracts, contracting in and out outside the city, I definitely gained an understanding of the Corp Council and how that's set up and how there are different, different things that come up where you need specific specialties. And so I understand that we do need to provide this type of financial support, especially in looking at such a critical issue. You never want people to think that we're trying to police ourselves. And so when you're looking at conduct of staff, it is important to have an outside entity to show that there's no siding. We are just trying to make sure that staff act appropriately as outlined in our policies. So I do agree with transferring these funds in order to ensure that we get appropriate representation surrounding the matters of misconduct. So thank you.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Alder Festa.
Thanks, Vice Chair Marchand. I think it was pretty obvious the magnitude of work that they have in their office that allows for outside counsel to be needed. There was a recommendation that was made by the public regarding an audit. I'm not sure we need an audit, but maybe we can get a report from Corporation Counsel on, past cases, maybe in the last couple of years, what we were able to accomplish in office versus outside of office. I don't know, maybe some kind of compromise between doing an audit and just us asking questions. That's all. But obviously, we need outside counsel as well to help us with the magnitude of the workload. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further discussion on the motion on item 1? Seeing none, I'll just say briefly for myself that I see that the motion is to transfer $200,000. The amount of increase needed is $325,000. Mr. Gormany and our city Corporation Counsel said they believe that the remaining $125,000 may come from other parts of the budget that may not be needed. Let's hope that that's the case. But you never know. We may see these folks again in the months ahead for further changes. So that's the first thing I would say. And in regards to the suggestion from the public, I am willing as vice chair to take that up with leadership. But I also would note that it won't be long before this body is going through departmental workshops during the budget season in April. And that may be a good moment to get more detailed information from the Corporation Counsel's office about this key question about insourcing versus outsourcing and building up expertise within the ranks, which takes time. So I would just make that observation. Any further discussion on motion on item number 1? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder DeCola.
Yes.
Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Walker Myers.
Yes.
Alder Festa.
Yes.
Alder Hurt.
Yes.
And Alder Decker.
Yes.
The item passes. Further motions.
I move item 2. Fee
Second.
schedule.
Thank you. So item 2, which is the Canaldoc Boathouse item, has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Alder Festa. And then Alder Walker Myers.
Yes, thanks again, Mr. Vice Chair. You know, I agree. I think the amounts that were presented are fair and comparable to other facilities regarding, you know, whatever is included with those fees as well. I am just concerned that the CBI is not considering being a revenue generator, and maybe that's the wrong term to use, but we do need to set money aside for the general operations of that building to not further burden our general fund, since we do contribute to the Canal Boathouse. And it should be run as, you know, a facility like the ice skating rink, the golf course, et cetera. So I hope they consider, you know, raising money and putting it aside in a savings so that we could continue to support the programs that they have in place for our youth as well as our residents, which is part of the deal with the Canal Boathouse that we as a board also expect them to continue and pursue, particularly, you know, we have an amazing coastline, and this is such a benefit to our city that we need to utilize it to its full capacity. So I hope they do just consider, and maybe it's me that's not understanding how they work their funding on a daily basis, but I would like it. I would like to see an endowment. I would like to see something bigger so we could support even bigger and better and improved programs. That's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Alder Walker Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I think that it is important to have, well, first I want to start with, I do think the fees are comparable, but I think it's really important to have a different fee structure for New Haven residents. I think that'll give people all across the city the ability to actually utilize it and to take advantage of that beautiful place that sit right there on the water. And I think all the programming that it supports give not just people that can afford it, but give our New Haven kids the opportunity to utilize the services. So I think it's really important. And as far as generating revenue, I would think that eventually it should be a revenue generating establishment, just because how beautiful it is and what the demand will be like with people really wanting to use it and utilize it. But I think we should deal with the fees that we're dealing with tonight, so we can get it open, so we can start being able to pay the bills. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam President. Any further discussion on item 2, the Canaldoc Boathouse fee structure? I would just say for myself that the City Plan Commission gave a favorable report, although the advice was that the Board of Alders consider how to balance the need to have a financially sustainable facility and the goal of making the facility accessible to New Haven residents of different incomes. And so that's a balance that we're trying to strike with this fee schedule. And I would note that it's useful that there are lower prices for New Haven residents versus folks who live outside of New Haven. I would also say that there's a variety of activity at the Canaldoc Boathouse, that many activities that are low cost. And so I'd want to distinguish between showing up for a program where you might have a nominal fee or no fee, depending on your situation, versus renting the facility for a function. Like I can go to a restaurant and have a cost-effective meal, but if I want to rent the restaurant for a reception before my wedding, that's a whole different thing. And so we should just keep in mind that there'll be multiple ways for New Haven residents to enjoy that boathouse, even just going down there and walking on the deck without paying anything. But if you want to have your wedding or your bar mitzvah or your shower there, or your 50th wedding anniversary, then you have to rent it, and that's a different thing. And so I would just say that. And then the second thing I would say is I'll be interested in the time of our budget discussion this spring to see how this, exactly how this Boathouse fund is listed, if it's included in the enterprise funds or if it's not quite ready for that. And I think we'll have more discussions then about how things have been going with this facility. But I am in favor of setting these rates and getting it started. Any further discussion on item number 2? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder DeCola,
Yes.
Alder Morrison,
Yes.
Alder Walker Myers,
Yes.
Alder Festa,
Yes.
Alder Hurt,
Yes.
and Alder Decker.
Yes.
The item passes. May I have a motion on items 3 and 4 together?
I move item 3 and 4 for read and file.
Second.
Items 3 and 4 have been moved to recommend the board read and file them. Any discussion on the motion?
How you doing?
How you doing?
Good, thank you.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder DeCola,
Yes.
Alder Morrison,
Yes.
Alder Walker Myers,
Yes.
Alder Festa,
Yes.
Alder Hurt,
Yes.
and Alder Decker.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, I move to close this meeting.
I believe the term you'd want to use is adjourn.
Second.
Correct, adjourn.
The motion to adjourn has been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to adjourn? Seeing none. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder DeCola,
Yes.
Alder Morrison,
Yes.
Alder Walker Myers,
Yes.
Alder Festa,
Yes.
Alder Hurt,
Yes.
and Alder Decker.
Yes.
The motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.